The morning they came to take my house, I was already awake. I'd been awake since 4, the way I always am now. 63 years old, and my body doesn't believe in sleeping past sunrise anymore. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my second cup of coffee, watching the sky go from black to gray through the window above the sink, when I heard the car door. I didn't think much of it at first. People come and go early in this neighborhood. Gainesville isn't a sleeping-in kind of town, but then I heard a second door, and then footsteps on the porch, and then a knock that didn't sound like a neighbor. It sounded official. I set my cup down and walked to the front door in my socks. When I opened it, there was a man in a brown uniform standing on my porch holding a manila envelope. Deputy from the Alachua County Sheriff's Office. Young kid, maybe 28, with the look of someone who didn't enjoy this part of his job. "Mr. Calloway?" he said. "That's me," I said. He held out the envelope. "I'm sorry, sir. I've been directed to serve you with these documents." I took the envelope without opening it. I looked past him, down the driveway, across the street, and that's when I saw them. My son-in-law's truck was parked at the curb in front of the Hendersons' empty house across the street. He was leaning against the hood with his arms crossed and the smile on his face that I will never forget as long as I live. Standing next to him was my daughter. She wasn't smiling, she was looking at the ground. But she didn't leave. I looked back at the deputy. "Can I ask who filed this?" I said. He shifted his weight. "The documents will explain everything, sir. I'd strongly recommend you speak with an attorney." I thanked him. He nodded and walked back to his cruiser, and I watched him go, and I did not look back across the street at the man who had been living in my house rent-free for 4 years, eating food I bought, driving a truck I helped him finance, smiling at me like he'd already won. I went inside and sat down at the kitchen table and opened the envelope. Let me back up. Because none of this makes sense without the beginning. And the beginning is important. My wife, Lorraine, passed away in the spring of 2019. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. I won't say more than that, because even now it costs me something to write it. She was the kind of woman who made every room warmer just by being in it, and when she left, the house felt like a building instead of a home. Our daughter, Stacy, was 31 then. She'd been married to a man named Boyd for about 2 years. I didn't dislike Boyd when they first got together. He was charming, the way certain men are charming. All eye contact and firm handshakes and yes sir, no sir. He worked in sales, or said he did. He drove a nice truck. He talked a lot about deals he was about to close. The deals never seemed to close, but there was always another one coming. After Lorraine passed, Stacy started calling more, coming by more, which I appreciated genuinely because the silence in that house was something I wasn't prepared for. She'd come over on Sunday afternoons and we'd sit on the back porch the way Lorraine and I used to, and sometimes we'd just watch the yard without saying much, and that was enough. Boyd started coming with her about 2 months in, and maybe 3 months after that, Stacy asked if they could stay in the house for a while. "Just until Boyd gets this project off the ground," she said. "Rents are insane right now, Daddy. We'd save up, be out of your hair in 6 months, maybe 8. I said yes. Of course I said yes. It was my daughter. They moved into the guest bedroom with 4 boxes and a dog they hadn't mentioned. I'd spent 31 years working as a licensed contractor in North Florida, building things for other people, and I'd paid off this house completely by the time I was 54. It was the thing I was most proud of. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a good roof, a workshop out back that I'd built with my own hands over one long summer. I was proud of what it represented, not just the money, but the years. The 6 months became a year. The year became 2. Boyd's project never came together, or it came together and fell apart, or he was pivoting to something new. I stopped asking. I cooked dinner most nights. I bought the groceries. Stacy worked part-time at a dental office and contributed some toward utilities when she remembered. Boyd did not contribute anything that I could identify. By year 3, something had shifted in the house. Small things at first. Boyd started referring to the workshop as the garage. He started parking in the spot where I'd always parked. He started having conversations on the phone in the kitchen, loud conversations while I was trying to watch the evening news, and when I'd clear my throat or turn up the volume, he'd look at me like I was being unreasonable. Stacy stopped meeting my eyes as much. I don't know exactly when I started to feel like a guest in my own home. I just know that by the time I did, it had already been true for a while. In October of last year, I had a knee surgery. Nothing catastrophic. A meniscus repair I'd been putting off for 18 months. But it meant I was laid up for 6 weeks, limited mobility. Couldn't drive myself for the first 2. Stacy handled some of my paperwork during that time. Bills, mostly. She had a key to my filing cabinet where I kept documents, bank statements, the deed to the house. I'd always been organized, everything in labeled folders. I trusted her completely. That was my mistake. Not trusting Stacy exactly, trusting Boyd by extension. Here is what I found in that envelope on my porch at 6:15 in the morning. A warranty deed, transferring ownership of my home from me to a limited liability company called BRC Ventures Group, LLC. Signed, apparently, by me. Notarized by a woman in Gainesville whose name I didn't recognize. Dated 3 weeks after my knee surgery, when I was still on the pain medication that made me foggy in a way I'd never experienced before. And an eviction notice. Filed by BRC Ventures Group, LLC, citing non-payment of rent. I had apparently been a tenant in my own home for the past 2 months without knowing it. I read through the documents twice, then I got up and poured the rest of my coffee down the sink, because my stomach had gone wrong. And I stood at the sink for a moment looking out at the backyard, at the workshop I built with my own hands, at the pecan tree Lorraine planted the year we moved in. Then I went to my bedroom and got dressed, and I called my attorney. His name is Warren, and he's been my attorney for over 20 years. I'd used him for every contract dispute I ever had in the contracting business, which over 3 decades amounted to more than a few. He's not a flashy man. He drives a 10-year-old Volvo and wears the same 3 ties in rotation. But he is the sharpest person I know. He answered on the second ring. "I need you this morning," I said. "How early?" he said. "How early?" he said. "Now," I said. He told me to come to his office. I called a cab because I didn't want to walk past Boyd's truck to get to my car. That's how rattled I was. In 40 years as a working man, I'd never once called a cab. Warren looked at the documents for 45 minutes without saying anything. I sat across from him and drank bad office coffee and looked at the framed photo on his wall of a largemouth bass he caught on Lake Santa Fe about 15 years ago. I'd been there that day. It had been a good day. Finally, he set the papers down. "Walk me through your surgery," he said. "The exact dates. What medication you were on. Who was in the house." I told him everything. He wrote notes in the small spiral notebook he always kept. When I finished, he looked at his notes for a moment. "The signature on this deed," he said. "Does it look like yours?" "There's a resemblance," I said. "But I did not sign that." "You're certain?" "Warren, I have signed my name on every single contract I've ever written for 31 years in this business. I know my signature. That is not my signature." He nodded slowly. "The notarization is a problem for them, actually. A notary is required to verify identity in person. If you weren't present, I was in my recliner in the living room 2 days after surgery," I said. "I wasn't going anywhere. Do you have any documentation of that? Medical records, pharmacy records, anything that shows your condition at the time of this notarization?" I told him I had all of it. My surgeon's discharge notes, the prescription records, even text messages from Stacy asking if I needed anything from the drugstore. I had kept everything, the way I always keep everything, because 30 years in the contracting business teaches you that documents are the difference between winning and losing. Warren leaned back in his chair. "This is fraud," he said. "Straightforward deed fraud. The notary is potentially criminally liable as well, depending on what she knew and when." "What do I do about the eviction?" I said. "You respond," he said. And when you respond, you file a counter-complaint. Let me make some calls today. I went home. Boyd's truck was still across the street. He was gone by the time I got there. But Stacy's car was in the driveway. I went inside and she was in the kitchen making coffee. And she looked up when I came in. And for just a second I saw something cross her face. Not guilt exactly. More like fear. "Good morning," she said. "I got served this morning," I said. I set the envelope on the counter between us. "You want to tell me about BRC Ventures Group?" Her face went a particular kind of still that I recognized. She'd had that face as a child when she broke something and was calculating whether she could get away with it. "Daddy," she said, "I know how this looks. Tell me one true thing," I said. "Just one." She didn't. She said a lot of words. She said Boyd had a plan, that the house would still be mine in a real sense, that they were going to pay rent back to me once the cash flow was established, that this was all legal, that Warren wouldn't understand the structure. She talked for 4 minutes without stopping, and in that 4 minutes she didn't say one thing that I could identify as truth. I picked up the envelope and went to my workshop. I didn't come out until evening. What happened over the next 6 weeks was methodical. Warren filed an emergency motion to halt the eviction proceedings, citing the fraudulent conveyance. The hearing was set for a Tuesday morning in county court. I gathered every document I had: purchase records, mortgage payoff confirmation, property tax statements in my name going back 20 years, the surgical discharge paperwork, the prescription records, the text messages. Warren retained a forensic document examiner out of Jacksonville. Her fee was $3,500. I paid it without blinking because I had spent 31 years building things and I was not going to let a man who had never built anything take the last thing I had. The document examiner's conclusion was 12 pages long. The signature on the deed did not match verified exemplars of my signature in 17 measurable characteristics. The ink composition was also inconsistent with what you'd expect from a signature made organically on the day the document was dated. In simpler terms, it was a forgery. The notary, a woman who ran a small mobile notary service out of her apartment on the east side of Gainesville, was interviewed by the county clerk's investigator. She initially maintained that I had been present. Then Warren's office obtained her appointment calendar through a records request and found no entry from my address on the date in question. Then they found a Venmo transaction from Boyd to the notary for $400 sent 12 days before the deed was filed, with the memo line reading, "Admin fee." She changed her statement. Boyd's attorney, a man I can only describe as someone who'd taken a wrong turn into the law from used car sales, filed 3 separate motions to delay the hearing. All 3 were denied. The morning of the hearing, I woke up at 4 the way I always do, and I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, and I thought about Lorraine. I thought about the Sunday afternoons on the back porch. I thought about the pecan tree. I thought about 31 years of work. I wasn't angry by then. The anger had burned itself out somewhere around week 3. What I felt that morning was something quieter, something closer to certainty. The courtroom was on the 2nd floor of the Alachua County Civil Courthouse on East University Avenue. I've driven past that building 100 times and never once thought I'd be sitting inside it. I wore my good jacket. I got there 15 minutes early. Boyd was already there, in a gray suit that fit him the way suits always fit men who don't usually wear them. He had his attorney beside him, and he looked at me when I came in with that same expression from the morning on the porch. Like this was already settled. Like the paperwork was just a formality. Stacy was not there. I want to say that made me feel something. Maybe it did. I don't know what to call it. Relief, I think. That she hadn't come to watch. The judge was a woman named Fernandez, silver-haired and economical with her attention. She'd been on the civil bench for 11 years. Warren had appeared before her many times. He told me she had no patience for procedural theater, and that if the evidence was clear, she would be efficient. She was. Boyd's attorney opened with a confident argument about the validity of the LLC structure and the legitimacy of the transfer. He used phrases like sophisticated transaction and arm's-length agreement. He said I had consented to a business arrangement that I now wished to disavow. Judge Fernandez let him finish. Then she asked one question. She looked at Boyd's attorney and she said, "Counsel, can you produce a single piece of evidence that the grantor, Mr. Calloway, was ambulatory and present at the time of notarization, given the medical documentation this court has already received?" The attorney started to answer. She raised one hand. "A yes or no will do." There was a silence in that courtroom that lasted about 4 seconds. It felt longer. "No, Your Honor," he said. She turned to Warren. Warren walked her through the forensic report, the Venmo transaction, the notary's recanted statement, the absence of any appointment record, the 17 measurable signature discrepancies. When he finished, she didn't deliberate. She voided the deed from the bench, declared the transfer fraudulent and without legal effect, and referred the matter to the state attorney's office for criminal investigation of both Boyd and the notary. She also awarded me attorney's fees. Boyd sat very still through all of it. His attorney was writing furiously on a yellow legal pad. I watched Boyd for a moment, and then I looked away, because I found I didn't have any interest in his face anymore. Outside the courthouse, in the parking lot, Warren shook my hand and said, "I'll get the fee order filed today." "Thank you," I said. "You did the hard part," he said. "You kept the records." I drove home. Boyd's truck was gone from across the street. Their things were gone from the guest room. I could tell just from the weight of the house when I walked in. The particular silence of it, the way it sat around me differently. I went to the kitchen and made coffee. I took it out to the back porch, and I sat in the chair where Lorraine used to sit, because mine was on the side facing the yard and hers was on the side facing the workshop, and sometimes I sit in hers just to see what she saw. The pecan tree was dropping leaves. The workshop needed a coat of paint on the south side. The yard was mine. I heard from Stacy once about 3 weeks after the hearing. A text message. It said, "I'm sorry, Daddy. I didn't know it would go this far." I read it twice. I thought about what to say for a long time. I thought about Sunday afternoons and the coffee she used to make and the way she'd looked at the ground that morning on the porch and not walked away. I typed back, "I know." I haven't heard from her since. I don't know if I will. There's a version of the future I can imagine where she comes back, where she's different, where we sit on the back porch again. I hold that version gently and I don't grip it too hard. Because I've learned late in life that the things you grip too hard are usually the things that break. Boyd was charged with deed fraud and forgery in the 2nd degree. The notary cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced charge. I was told by Warren that Boyd's case would likely result in a plea, and that the plea would involve restitution and probation at minimum, and potentially a felony conviction that would follow him for the rest of his life. That was enough for me. I didn't need more than that. I'm not telling this story because I want sympathy. I don't, particularly. I'm 63 years old, and I've built things with my own hands, and I've buried my wife, and I've raised a daughter, and I've kept records of everything I've ever done, and when the moment came where all of those things mattered, they mattered. I'm telling it because I know there are people listening who have felt that particular feeling. The one where you open the door and find out that someone who was supposed to love you decided to bet against you instead. And I want those people to know that the bet doesn't always pay. Keep your documents. Know what you have. Don't sign anything when you're not yourself. And when someone stands across the street from your house and smiles like they've already won, let them smile. The paperwork tells the truth in the end.